He could feel the wind on his face, though he stood in the cavernous emptiness of the Weirwood's domain. Beneath layers of time and memory, Bran Stark heard the faint rustling of leaves like whispers in a dream. It was there he first found the image of a silver-haired prince, a man with an otherworldly dignity, standing beside a harp that shone with pale gold in the half-light. Something in Bran's heart clenched with both awe and grief. He knew that this prince, Rhaegar Targaryen, was meant to die on the Trident. He also knew, somehow, that it wasn't yet too late to reach him, not if the old gods allowed it, not if he could whisper through the branches of history and find his voice in a time before the doom fell upon House Targaryen and the realm itself. The wind in the Weirwood net blew again, sounding like sighs of ice and memory, stirring the illusions of the past. Bran slipped into that vast tapestry, half dreaming, half praying, and felt himself cast back years before he was even born. Rhaegar Targaryen stood in the courtyard of the Red Keep, the muted light of dawn painting his silver-gold hair with a honeyed glow. He wore a simple tunic of deep black, edged with the three-headed dragon in silver thread. Though he was not armored for battle, an undercurrent of restlessness vibrated in his posture. He was a man who had wrestled with prophecy and purpose his entire life. He felt on the cusp of a great decision. The quiet of the morning gave him a respite from the press of court life, from the watchful eyes of lords and knights who measured his every breath. He had dreamed again. He had dreamed of a face, blurred as if seen through troubled waters, calling him by name. In the dream, the words were indistinct, and yet he understood the meaning. Danger was coming. War was upon them. And there was still time to reshape destiny. It was not the first time Rhaegar had heard strange words in the lonely hours of night. His life had been a litany of prophecies, riddles, and half-finished songs that spoke of fire and shadows. Usually, these messages came in scraps, illusions dancing behind his eyelids. But this voice had felt present, urgent, almost as if the speaker had reached through the stream of years to warn him. Perhaps he was losing his mind, the madness that gripped his father, Aerys, ran in Targaryen blood. Or perhaps Rhaegar was being guided by something older, something that dwelled beyond the knowledge of men. He looked upward, exhaling in the crisp dawn air. He told himself it was just a dream. But a persistent anxiety haunted him, born from the knowledge that his father's tyranny was creating enemies at every turn. Aerys had become paranoid, cruel, lashing out at friend and foe alike. The unrest in the realm had grown, coalescing around Robert Baratheon and the lords who supported him. Rhaegar sensed that if a rebellion erupted, it would be catastrophic, something unstoppable. He had tried reasoning with his father, though it was not easy to reason with a king who saw conspiracies in every shadow. Rhaegar had found no victory. Instead, he found resistance and anger, black moods that flared into shrieking accusations of betrayal. If the realm was to be saved, Rhaegar might have to do it alone. He left the courtyard to walk along the deserted corridors of the Red Keep, his footsteps echoing. Memories of the night he crowned Lyanna Stark as the Queen of Love and Beauty sprang unbidden to his mind. Everyone had looked upon his choice with shock, for Elia Martell was his wife, beloved by many. Still, something in Lyanna had called to him, a light like the promise of spring after a bitter winter. But that moment, that single act, might have been the first spark that lit the wildfire of rebellion. The bitterness of House Stark could not be overlooked, especially as rumors spread and speculation soared. Rhaegar considered that the voice in his dream might also be connected to the Starks. Something about the North, about the old gods, whispered through his soul now. He made his way to Maegor's Holdfast, seeking the comfort of a secluded library he favored. Books had been his refuge since boyhood, when he first believed himself meant for prophecy rather than the sword. Along the way, he passed a tapestry that depicted Aegon the Conqueror's landing in Westeros. The dragons loomed monstrous and majestic, the Targaryens conquerors in every thread. In the hush of the hallway, Rhaegar paused and closed his eyes. The weight of legacy pressed upon him, but also the quiet panic that told him time was short. An unformed resolution began to crystallize. He had to gather the loyal lords and knights, he had to quell rebellion before it bloomed, or at least he had to prepare for the worst. And yet, a silent question intruded. What if there were a way to avoid so much bloodshed? In that moment, he felt something scrape across his consciousness, a voice, faint as distant thunder. He could not make out the words, but it made his pulse quicken. He steadied himself, taking a breath and letting the intangible presence slip away like a dream. Then, continuing on, he told himself that if any man could hold back the tide of violence, it would be him. He needed to believe that. Hope was fragile, especially in the Targaryen line. So much had been lost already, the sense of unity, the respect of the realm, the belief that a Targaryen was more than a symbol of fire and madness. He pushed forward, deciding that he would take action, dream or no dream. Far away from the Red Keep in both time and space, Bran stood among the white bark of the weirwoods. He could see Rhaegar as though peering through a hazy lens. It wasn't how normal sight worked. He felt Rhaegar's presence, sensed his uncertainty. In the swirling tapestry of possibility, Bran reached out, or tried to, though he had never done anything like this before. He remembered the stories of how the three-eyed raven had whispered to the past, shaping events in ways no one could trace. If this power was truly his, perhaps he could do the same. Perhaps he could right some old wrong and shift the course of the realm's story. The old gods listened, or so he prayed. I can't let him die, Bran thought in that misty dimension, uncertain if the weirwood would carry his voice. He was meant to die, but maybe if he lived, everything might be different. Maybe all the horrors that came later, maybe we can stop them. He sensed the presence of the heart tree around him, the carved face weeping red sap that trickled onto the roots like old blood. The quiet acceptance of the forest weighed on him, and yet he felt a push, a subtle permission. He pressed his hands against the trunk. The bark felt like living ice, and he whispered, Rhaegar, Robert Baratheon will rise against you. The realm will burn if you don't act. You can still save everyone. Bran's heart hammered in his chest as he repeated the words, half believing it was nothing more than a desperate plea. But the magic of the old gods was not to be trifled with, and he felt the words echo outward. The next day, Rhaegar found himself in the silent library, surrounded by musty tomes and old histories. A narrow window let a shaft of sunlight fall upon him as he turned pages in a rare volume concerning the prophecies of the prince that was promised. His mind drifted from the text. He was trying to recall a dream from the previous night. He had heard words. He was sure of it this time. They had been urgent, a warning. Something about Robert Baratheon. Something about rebellion and a chance to prevent ruin. He frowned. Even without dreams, he knew that Robert Baratheon was a man who commanded respect. Tall, broad-shouldered, a formidable warrior, and well-liked by lords across the Seven Kingdoms. Robert's distaste for Targaryen rule was open enough among his friends and allies. But to rise in rebellion would be treason. Was the realm truly so close to turning on the crown? He tried to chase down each half-remembered snippet of the dream. The realm will burn. Robert Baratheon. Act now. Save everyone. The words, though intangible, seemed to swirl in his mind with the force of command. Rhaegar set aside the book and stood. He must talk with his closest counselors. Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, was a steadfast friend and perhaps the greatest knight in the realm. Lewin Martell, his uncle by marriage, also possessed a keen political mind. These were men Rhaegar trusted, men who would not dismiss him as a dreamer. He would call them quietly, away from his father's paranoid gaze, and see if they could form a plan. If the realm truly teetered on the edge of rebellion, they must know first how best to prevent bloodshed. That afternoon, in a secret solar rarely visited, Rhaegar gathered Arthur Dayne and Lewin Martell. Both men arrived wearing plain cloaks, looking wary of being observed. The air in the chamber carried a faint smell of parchment and dust. Rhaegar paced a few steps, then turned to face them, expression solemn. You must think me foolish, he began in a low voice, but I have reason to believe Robert Baratheon will soon openly rebel. I cannot explain how I know, only that there have been signs. He thought of the dream voice, of the sense of cold dread that had gripped him. My father's cruelty has pushed the realm to the brink, and Robert's claim through his grandmother is not insignificant. If the houses of the Stormlands, the North, and the Vale unite under him, we will face a serious challenge. Arthur Dayne's dark eyes revealed no mockery. You need not explain the source of your knowledge, my prince. I have heard the same rumors, and the realm is indeed restless. If the lords see you as a better alternative to your father, some may still hold faith in Targaryen rule. But if they see no difference between you and King Aerys. Lewin Martell, clad in simple gray, looked thoughtful. We must be careful. The king sees enemies everywhere, including his own kin. If we move against his wishes, he may brand us traitors. Yet if we do nothing, we hand the rebels the advantage of surprise. Rhaegar inhaled slowly. In his heart, he knew that confronting his father directly would be a perilous path. Aerys was half-mad and viciously proud. Any suggestion of forging peace or bending to demands might enrage him. Yet if Rhaegar did nothing, the realm would bleed. We must act in secret, at least for the time being. Arthur, I will need you to keep a careful watch on the Storm Lords, the Vale, the North. Gather any intelligence you can about their allegiances. Lewin, use your position in the King's Guard and your connections to Dorne. Perhaps you can reassure Prince Doran and Princess Elia's family that I am working to stabilize the realm. I will do my best to muster loyal forces without drawing attention from my father. Lewin nodded. Dorne has ever been strong, but we have no love for madness. If you can convince them your path is wise, you may secure their backing. But the moment the king hears you are gathering forces, he may interpret it as treason. Rhaegar gave a grim smile. We shall have to be subtle then. I will arrange for tourneys, small gatherings, hunts, any excuse that might let me speak with lords and knights who value peace. We cannot let the rebellion erupt unchallenged. Arthur bowed, the sunlight catching the pommel of dawn at his hip. Your will is mine, my prince. And if it comes to swords, I will stand beside you. Those words gave Rhaegar a measure of comfort. He dismissed them after a few more quiet instructions, certain that the fate of the 7 kingdoms now rested on the blade's edge. If the dream voice spoke truly, if Robert was indeed ready to raise his banners, then time was short. Still, Rhaegar could not help recalling that in the dream, the voice had also mentioned saving everyone. It offered hope that violence might yet be averted. Despite his best intentions, a corner of his mind whispered, perhaps destiny cannot be changed. Perhaps the tragedy is set. But Rhaegar forced himself to remain firm. He would fight destiny with every breath if it meant sparing the realm. Bran watched from somewhere unseen, feeling a surge of relief. He could sense that Rhaegar was taking steps he had not taken in the original chain of events that Bran remembered learning from Old Nan, from Maesters, from the stories of how the Targaryens fell. This was different. The future was in flux. But it would not be easy. The darkness of war still loomed. Bran tried to hold on to that tenuous thread of connection. If he could keep whispering, keep guiding, perhaps the worst catastrophes could be avoided. Though a part of him trembled with fear that some other darkness might arise in place of the old. In the weeks that followed, Rhaegar busied himself with carefully orchestrated gatherings. He announced a discreet tourney in the Crownlands, something small, to celebrate the harvest. Only those most trusted were invited, as well as lords who seemed open to the prince's leadership. On the surface, it was merely an entertainment to please the crown, to remind the realm of Targaryen generosity. In truth, it was Rhaegar's attempt to weave a tenuous web of alliances. He spoke gently to older lords who remembered the golden years of King Jaehaerys II or King Aegon V, men who might still hold a glimmer of loyalty to the Targaryen lineage if only they were convinced Rhaegar could restore honor to the throne. He courted younger knights with stirring words of hope, promising an era of prosperity if peace prevailed. And quietly, behind the scenes, he probed them about Robert Baratheon. Was he raising troops, forging alliances with Eddard Stark or Jon Arryn? Did the Stormlands bristle under Aerys' tyranny? To Rhaegar's dismay, the answers confirmed his worst fears. Rumors abounded that Robert was indeed in close contact with Eddard Stark. Many men admired Robert's boldness, his martial skill, and his easy laugh. Eddard Stark's honor was beyond reproach, and if he believed the realm needed saving, that was a powerful endorsement in the north. Jon Arryn was a father figure to both Robert and Ned, and the Vale was no stranger to discontent with King Aerys. If these 3 men bound together in rebellion, they would undoubtedly draw more lords to their cause. The seeds of war were already sown. It might only require one spark to set the kingdoms aflame. During one of the quieter moments of the tourney, Rhaegar stood beneath the shade of a tall oak, drinking watered wine from a silver goblet. Across the field, he spotted Ser Barristan and Selmy, always vigilant, eyes scanning the crowd. Rhaegar's thoughts wandered to his father, who had not come. Aerys was sequestered in the Red Keep, muttering about conspiracies. Rhaegar wondered if the time would soon come when he, the prince, must choose between his father and the good of the realm. A bitter dread clung to him, though he tried to hide it behind a princely smile. As the jousting continued in the afternoon sun, Rhaegar felt a strange presence steal over him once more, as though a cool breeze had passed through the sweltering day. He closed his eyes and heard a faint murmur, "Be ready. Robert moves faster than you think." The voice was so near that it sent a jolt through his heart. He looked around, startled, but saw no one out of place. Lords and ladies cheered at the jousting, the crash of lances and the whinny of horses filled the air. Only he had heard the voice. Though it should have frightened him, he felt instead a sharp determination. If the realm would soon be on the precipice of rebellion, he must gather his allies now. He sought out Arthur Dayne after the day's events. They spoke in hushed voices near the stables, the scent of hay and horse sweat strong in the evening air. Rhaegar informed Arthur that they would ride out quietly in the coming days to speak with certain lords who had not attended the tourney. They would ensure that Targaryen loyalists were prepared to act the moment Robert's rebellion became public. Arthur nodded, his expression resolute. They agreed to move swiftly and discreetly. That very night, word reached Rhaegar that Robert Baratheon had been calling his bannermen for a grand feast at Storm's End. It was an old ruse. Rhaegar recognized it for what it was, a gathering of Storm Lords, likely with the intention to discuss how best to overthrow the Targaryens. Time was running out. Rhaegar felt a twist of fear, but also an odd flicker of hope. The voice in his dreams had warned him he was not helpless. Though many might fall under Robert's banner, not all would be eager to plunge the realm into chaos. If Rhaegar could show them a different path, if he could prove that the throne could be redeemed, he might peel away enough support to weaken Robert's position. At least, that was his strategy. War might still come, but perhaps it could be made smaller, less devastating, more controlled. Perhaps it could even be averted if Robert's momentum failed. And so Rhaegar departed the tourney early with Arthur Dayne and a small retinue of loyal knights, traveling by night to avoid undue notice. Bran watched these movements through the weirwood net, feeling a profound mixture of anticipation and worry. He wondered if the ripples he was causing would truly spare the realm or if they would unleash some unexpected horror. Still, he kept trying to whisper through time whenever Rhaegar's mind was still enough to listen. Sometimes it felt as if he was heard, other times as if he was only a ghostly wind. Rhaegar, for his part, was haunted by the sense of being guided. As he traveled, he thought of the men he had to see. The lords of Massey's Hook, Rosby, and Stokeworth, houses close to King's Landing that might side with the prince if convinced. He also resolved to send secret messages to House Tyrell in the Reach and House Martell in Dorne, leaning on his ties by marriage. The key, he believed, was to show them that he would be a different kind of king. He would not burn his enemies alive, nor bathe the realm in blood for petty slights. He would restore the honor of the crown. Some might scoff that a single prince's promises could not outweigh the madness of the king, but Rhaegar believed that if enough lords stood with him, King Aerys could be contained, forced to relinquish power, or at least overshadowed in decision-making. It was a dangerous plan, veering close to treason, yet the alternative was an open war that could shatter the Seven Kingdoms. When they arrived at a modest castle belonging to House Massey, Rhaegar left most of his party outside the walls. Only Arthur Dayne and a squire accompanied him into the courtyard. The castellan greeted them with wide eyes, startled by the prince's unannounced visit. They were shown into a dimly lit great hall, the stone walls hung with old banners. Lord Massey, a cautious man past his 50th year, approached with a formal bow. Prince Rhaegar, Lord Massey said carefully, an unexpected honor. Rhaegar inclined his head, offering a kind smile. My lord, I apologize for arriving without warning, but I have urgent matters to discuss. Matters that concern the stability of the realm. He paused. I would speak privately if you will allow it. Lord Massey hesitated, then waved off his attendants. Soon enough, they were seated at a modest wooden table, a single candle sputtering between them. Arthur stood behind Rhaegar like a sentinel. The squire lingered at the far end of the hall. Rhaegar leaned forward, voice low. I know you have concerns about the king's recent actions, his condemnation of lords for trivial reasons, his punitive taxes. And I know that you are not alone in your discontent. Robert Baratheon is calling his bannermen, no doubt to raise the banners of rebellion. My father has given them cause. I do not deny it. But I come to you with a pledge. If war can be avoided, I will see it done. If it cannot, I vow to rule differently. My father's madness will not last forever. The realm must not be torn apart. Lord Massey's eyes flickered with interest. And how do you propose to prevent that? If Robert truly means to rebel, can words alone stop him? Rhaegar hesitated. He might be swayed if his main cause, my father's tyranny, can be resolved without further bloodshed. If enough lords support me, we can show Robert that the realm need not be drowned in war. Even as he said the words, Rhaegar understood it was wishful. Robert Baratheon hated Targaryens, but did he hate them enough to risk thousands of lives? Perhaps not if he believed a better path existed. Alternatively, if he insists on war, I must ensure that those who want peace stand with me. Lord Massey looked at the candle's flame as though searching for an omen. Prince Rhaegar, I have long admired your qualities. You are not your father. The realm sees that. But your father is still king, still commanding the city watch, the gold cloaks, and many lords who fear him. How do we place our faith in you without incurring the king's wrath? Rhaegar's voice softened. Have faith in me. When the time is right, stand with me and declare your allegiance. We can do this together. If not, we will face chaos and Robert Baratheon will seize the throne. I do not think that is best for the realm. Lord Massey, I beg you, keep your men prepared. When I send word, you will know my intentions are serious. Arthur Dane placed a gentle hand on the pommel of Dawn, a symbol of earnestness rather than threat. It seemed to persuade Lord Massey at least somewhat. Lord Massey exhaled slowly. Very well. I have no desire to see Storm's End overshadow the Red Keep. We will be ready, Prince Rhaegar. He paused. But be cautious. If the king learns of your actions, he may turn on you before your plans reach fruition. Afterwards, Rhaegar took his leave. Outside, Arthur studied his friend. Massey seemed uncertain. Rhaegar nodded, watching the moonlit courtyard. Many will be. We are treading on a sword's edge. Arthur's hand rested briefly on Rhaegar's shoulder. I will follow you, come what may. Some men can still be swayed by honor. That night, as they rode on to their next destination, Rhaegar felt the chill night air prickle at his skin. He couldn't suppress the lingering dread in his heart. He hoped each quiet meeting would build a chain of alliances strong enough to deter Robert's wrath, but if the realm's lords saw the king as a true monster, they might back Robert. And if Robert believed violence was the only path, what then? He looked up at the stars. The Targaryen's sigil soared in memory, a dragon triumphant, but he felt the fleeting nature of all mortal glory. He pressed on. Back in the Weirwood vision, Bran sensed a shift like the changing course of a river. He tried to see the future that might come from this. Scenes flickered in his mind. Men preparing for war, ravens flying with black wings over fields of green, Robert's warhammer smashing armor. But then, as though a veil was drawn, the images vanished. He realized that no path was certain anymore. The prophecy-laden tapestry had frayed. Yet a subtle hope glimmered, fueled by the simple fact that Rhaegar was not complacent this time. He was not walking blindly to his death. In the Red Keep, King Aerys was not oblivious. Whispers reached his ears that his son had been traveling to certain lords under the guise of fostering goodwill. The king grew suspicious. Paranoia curdled his thoughts. He refused to meet with Rhaegar upon his return, demanding that Varys the Spider watch him closely. My own son seeks to steal my throne, Aerys spat, pacing the throne room late at night. His fingernails, already grown long and ragged, scratched at the scabs on his wrists. They all betray me. Tywin, Rhaegar, the lot of them. Varys bowed and scraped, promising to deliver any hint of treachery. The king's eyes glittered with mania beneath the flickering torches. He considered arresting Rhaegar, but Varys counseled patience. Cunning. The realm could not be lost if they played the game of shadows. Aerys agreed, for the moment. Rhaegar felt the tension the moment he returned. The courtiers at the Red Keep spoke in hushed voices, eyes darting with worry. Servants seemed on edge, as if expecting a sudden explosion of royal fury. Rhaegar's sisters, Rhaella, poor battered by Aerys, was long gone. Only talk of him having once had a sister lingered in the halls. His father's cruelty had left scars throughout the castle. Passing the throne room, Rhaegar felt a chill, recalling the stories of how his father had burned men alive. He thought, if I must be king to stop this, so be it. But the notion filled him with sorrow. He didn't crave power for its own sake. He craved the realm's peace. Even as the atmosphere thickened with tension, a new rumor reached King's Landing. Robert Baratheon had called his banners openly. It was said that Ned Stark stood with him and Jon Arryn as well. War was no longer a mere possibility, it had begun. The official announcement, carried by a raven, proclaimed that Robert denounced King Aerys as a tyrant, unfit to rule. He demanded that Rhaegar and all Targaryens be turned over for justice, citing the scandal around Lyanna Stark's disappearance and possible abduction. The letter claimed that House Stark had been grievously wronged, that Brandon Stark's death in King's Landing was murder, that Rickard Stark's execution was an abomination. The North and the Stormlands stood united, with the Vale at their side. More houses were expected to join. The rebellion had begun in earnest. Panic seized the court. Aerys raged, screaming for pyromancers, for wildfire. He demanded that the traitors be burned. Lords cowered, many had no desire to see the city or the realm drenched in flames. Rhaegar watched with dawning horror as his father's mania ran rampant. He tried to counsel caution. He tried to suggest negotiations, but Aerys wouldn't hear it. They will die screaming, was the only response the king offered. Rhaegar realized that time had run out. The war had come. Now it was a question of who would stand with the rightful crown and who would rally to the rebel cause. Rhaegar resolved to ride out at the head of a loyalist army but not to wreak devastation. He intended to meet Robert in battle if forced, yet perhaps he could push for parley if only to avoid an endless conflict. He summoned Arthur Dayne and Barristan and Selmy to his side along with other loyal knights. Elia Martell, his wife, looked on anxiously, holding their children close. Rhaegar's face was solemn as he packed his armor, the same black steel and rubies he would have worn in another timeline at the Battle of the Trident. But this time, the ruby seemed less a herald of doom and more a symbol of a hidden destiny. "I shall form the royal host," Rhaegar told them. "We will march for the Stormlands, for Robert will likely make his first stand there. But I will insist on a meeting before swords clash. If Robert is sensible, if he truly loves the realm, he must speak with me." Elia's eyes glistened with tears. "He hates us, Rhaegar. He blames you for Lyanna Stark. He blames your father for so much else. Will he listen?" Rhaegar set a hand gently on her shoulder. "I must try." He closed his eyes. "My father, he is lost to his madness. But that does not mean the realm must be lost. Tell Prince Doran to keep Dorne ready. If I fail, Dorne must protect you and the children. But if I succeed," his voice trailed off. He didn't dare articulate the fragile hope that this war could be averted before it truly ignited. Elia nodded, understanding the weight he carried. Bran, from his vantage in the Weirwood world, felt an urgent need to reach out again. He sensed that Rhaegar was about to face Robert on a battlefield far from the crossing at the Trident. In the original course of events, they had met near the Ruby Ford. Rhaegar's chest had been crushed by Robert's warhammer, and the tide of the rebellion had turned irreversibly. Now that future was uncertain. Bran braced himself and tried once more to push his voice through the ages. "Meet him in peace. Show him you are not your father." Over and over, he willed the message to span the impossible distance. The Targaryen host marched out from King's Landing, banners rippling in the breeze. The three-headed dragon glimmered in red and black, a sight that once struck terror in the hearts of Westeros. But many men in the Loyalist army wondered if they marched to save the throne or to feed the flames of Aerys' madness. Rhaegar led them grimly, Arthur Dayne at his side, Barristan and Selmy near the vanguard. They moved swiftly, anxious to intercept any rebel forces before they could converge into an overwhelming power. Scouts reported that Robert's banners were indeed gathering near Summerhall, an old Targaryen ruin that carried tragic memories. Rhaegar felt an odd pang when he heard it. Summerhall had been where his grandfather had died, and it bore a certain significance in the prophecies Rhaegar cherished. Perhaps destiny converged upon that site once more. They reached Summerhall at dusk. The rebels had not fully assembled yet, only Robert's Stormlanders and a small contingent from the Reach that had switched sides early on. No sign of Eddard Stark or Jon Arryn yet, though scouts claimed they were only days away. The ruined castle loomed dark against the setting sun, half-burned walls and collapsed towers a silent testament to old tragedy. Rhaegar ordered his men to make camp across a gentle valley from the rebel lines. He urged them to fortify positions but not to provoke a fight overnight. Some rebellious knights rode out, perhaps to test the loyalists, but it remained mostly skirmishes, no pitched battle. Tension crackled in the air like the hush before a storm. Inside Rhaegar's tent, candlelight flickered. He removed his gauntlets and looked around at Arthur, Barristan, Lewin Martell, and a few other trusted commanders. At dawn, he said, "I will request a parley. If Robert Baratheon agrees to speak, then we have a chance." Barristan seemed concerned. "And if he refuses, my prince?" Rhaegar set his jaw. "Then we do what we must. But I will not strike the first blow. This war is not a petty spat. It's a fight for the soul of the realm. I must show I am different from my father. Let the songs say that I offered peace." Outside, the night was eerily calm. Bran peered through the swirling tapestry of leaves and memories, heart-pounding. This was the crux, the moment in time that might break in a new direction. If Robert refused peace, war would erupt in full fury. But if he listened, if only for a moment. Come dawn, Rhaegar rode out from the camp with a small honor guard. He wore gleaming black armor chased with silver filigree, the 7 rubies on his breastplate catching the early sun. Arthur Dayne bore the white cloak of the King's Guard, carrying no shield, only dawn. Barristan accompanied them as well. They halted midway between the two armies. A line of nervous men-at-arms watched on both sides. The wind carried the scent of dew and the faint tang of old ashes from Summerhall's ruins. Before long, Robert Baratheon came into view astride a massive warhorse. He wore heavy plate, his antlered helm under one arm. Even from a distance, Rhaegar could see the thunderous set of Robert's brow, the tension in his shoulders. Beside him rode a few Stormland lords. They reined in, leaving a short space between themselves and Rhaegar's party. Robert's voice was a roar in the still morning. Rhaegar Targaryen, you dare request a parley after what your father has done to the Starks? After you stole Lyanna from me? Rhaegar's mouth went dry. He forced calm into his voice. I requested this parley precisely because too much blood has been spilled already. I wish to resolve this without sacrificing thousands more. Robert sneered, spoken like a coward who fears the justice of the realm. His hand gripped the shaft of the warhammer at his side. A breath's hesitation. Rhaegar removed his helm, letting Robert see his face. If you wish to fight me alone, I'll not shrink from it. I stand by my decisions. But I tell you this, Robert, I am not my father. If I become king, I swear to rule with fairness to restore what he has broken. If you truly love the realm as you claim, then stand down. Work with me. There is a better way. Robert barked a harsh laugh, though his eyes flickered with uncertainty. A better way? Your father roasted Rhaegar Stark alive. Brandon Stark was strangled. You crowned Lyanna in that cursed tourney. She was to be my betrothed. And now you speak of peace. Rhaegar hesitated, searching for the right words. I know what happened to the Starks. I lament it. My father, he is lost in madness, Robert. I cannot undo the horror of Brandon and Rhaegar's deaths, but I can stop further atrocities. Help me remove him from power. Help me set the crown on a saner head. Robert narrowed his eyes. You would commit treason against your father? It is not treason if the king is mad beyond reason. You speak of justice. Where's justice for the lords he burned, for the realm he terrorizes? I swear I intend to see him removed. I offer you my hand, Robert. The Targaryen line need not end in blood. We can forge a new beginning. A hush fell over the plain. Soldiers on both sides strained to hear. Robert's expression was torn, rage and confusion mingling. You think I'm fool enough to trust a Targaryen? Lyanna, she vanished after you gave her that crown of flowers. Where is she? Did you lock her away? Force her, eh? Rhaegar's voice cracked. Lyanna came to me willingly, but I swear by the old gods and the new I have not harmed her. She is safe, though she remains hidden for her own reasons. I cannot speak for her heart. If you would meet her, perhaps we can arrange it in time. But first we must end this war. The Stormland lords behind Robert muttered angrily, unconvinced. Robert's face twisted. You expect me to let your father live? To let the Targaryens keep the throne? Rhaegar paused. He cannot remain king. If you stand with me, we can force him to step aside or we can confine him. Then I will ascend as king and swear to uphold a just rule. You will have my ear and the realm can heal. If you demand my life, you will only sow more chaos. The Targaryen loyalists will not yield simply because you kill me. The war will drag on, swallowing thousands. Robert's knuckles whitened on the warhammer. You speak of reason. You speak of mercy. Yet you Targaryens have shown the realm none. Arthur Dayne interjected quietly. Not all Targaryens are the same, Lord Baratheon. You know Prince Rhaegar's reputation. He is no butcher. He is no oathbreaker. Robert glared at Arthur, then back at Rhaegar. The memory of love for Lyanna warred in his face against hatred for the Targaryens. All around, the tension was palpable. Finally, Robert spoke, voice rough with emotion. If I lower my banners, if I yield, what justice do the Starks receive? Rhaegar took a steadying breath. We can hold a formal tribunal for those responsible for Brandon and Rhaegar's death, my father foremost. I will hand him over to the High Septon's judgment if necessary. The crown will make reparations to House Stark. Lyanna, if she wishes, can return home. I cannot resurrect the dead. But I can do what is in my power to ensure no more blood need be spilled. A swirl of wind rippled the banners, carrying dust across the field. Robert's face was a turmoil of shifting emotions, fury, grief, and a flicker of reluctant consideration. He looked at the thousands of men behind him, loyal Storm Lords who believed in him. He thought of Ned Stark approaching from the north. He thought of Jon Arryn, who had pledged him unwavering support. Yet before him stood Rhaegar Targaryen, offering a path that did not require the Seven Kingdoms to drown in war. Would the realm accept a Targaryen king after everything that had happened? Possibly, if that king dethroned the Mad King. But Robert's personal rage was a tidal wave. He wanted vengeance. He wanted Targaryen blood. Still, he was not blind to the possibility that a long war might leave him with a broken realm. He clenched his teeth so hard it felt they might crack. Slowly, deliberately, Robert let the warhammer's head drop to the ground. He raised his gaze to Rhaegar. I'll grant you this, Targaryen, I'll not strike the first blow today. I'll send word to Eddard and Jon Arryn. We will hear more of this offer. But if I sense treachery, if you or your father spill one more drop of innocent blood, I will rip down the Red Keep stone by stone. Hope flared in Rhaegar's chest. He bowed his head solemnly. You have my word, Robert Baratheon. Let us pray this leads to peace. The two men turned and rode back to their respective lines. A hush still lay over the plain as though the entire army on both sides held its breath. Then, slowly, the tension eased. Men stood down. The day passed without a battle, an unexpected miracle. Messengers rode out to hail Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn, urging them to come speak with Prince Rhaegar before hostilities escalated. Arthur Dayne looked at Rhaegar, a small smile tugging at his lips. Barristan Selmy allowed a breath of relief to escape. Rhaegar, though outwardly calm, was trembling inside. A single thread of peace had been woven from the chaos. It might yet snap, but at least it was there. Across time, Bran let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He could almost feel the swift, uncertain heartbeat of fate. This was a turning point. The war had not exploded into the furious conflagration it once was. Robert Baratheon, though seething with anger and grief, had consented to talk. Rhaegar Targaryen, brandishing a new sense of purpose, had dared to challenge his father's tyranny from within. If their negotiations succeeded, the realms of men might avoid the darkness that Bran had known. Yet the road ahead was fraught with peril. King Aerys would never willingly relinquish his throne. The rebellious lords might not trust any Targaryen. And Robert, deeply wounded by the loss of Lyanna, might decide at any moment that vengeance was more important than peace. Word soon reached King's Landing that Rhaegar had entered a truce with Robert Baratheon. The king reacted as if bitten by a viper. He spat curses, demanded his pyromancers prepare wildfire. He railed at Varys for failing to stop this treachery. He ordered that Rhaegar be seized and brought before him in chains, that all those who stood with him be named traitors. But he discovered, to his fury, that many of the city's guards were more loyal to Rhaegar than to him. The seeds of Rhaegar's earlier efforts had borne fruit. Enough men believed in the prince's cause that Aerys could not simply snap his fingers and arrest him. Chaos erupted in the Red Keep, with some gold cloaks refusing to obey the king's edicts. Lords loyal to Aerys and lords loyal to Rhaegar confronted each other in tense standoffs. The tension in the castle soared. Fearing for their lives, some courtiers fled. Grand Maester Pycelle prevaricated, trying to stay in the king's favor while quietly helping Rhaegar's supporters. Jaime Lannister, the youngest member of the Kingsguard, guarded the king's door but found himself uncertain where his loyalties should lie. Aerys threatened to burn the city if challenged. Servants whispered that barrels of wildfire were being placed in strategic locations, a horrifying repeat of the Maw. Nest that would have destroyed King's Landing if Robert had taken the city by force in another timeline. In Summerhall, Rhaegar received frantic letters from the Red Keep detailing the king's mania. He pressed a palm to his temple. If the city rose against Aerys, or if Aerys unleashed wildfire, thousands could die. Every passing day increased the risk. And yet Rhaegar was still waiting for Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn to arrive to discuss an official end to the conflict. If he marched on King's Landing now, it could appear like the very rebellion he was trying to prevent. He turned to Arthur Dayne in despair. "My father will destroy everything. The city, my family, he must be stopped, yet I cannot appear to be usurping him without the realm's support." Arthur's face was grave. "Perhaps we need to secure Robert Baratheon's official alliance sooner. If the rebels become your allies, then you are not a lone prince usurping your father, you are acting in concert with the great houses to end tyranny." Rhaegar exhaled. "I'll ride to meet Ned Stark myself if I must. Time is of the essence." Messengers went out urging Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn to hurry. They arrived days later, their approach quiet and cautious. Ned Stark looked weary, sorrow etched into his stern face. Jon Arryn carried himself with the dignity of an elder statesman. They were greeted with civility by Rhaegar's men and led to a hastily arranged council within Summerhall's half-ruined Great Hall. There, Rhaegar awaited them along with Robert and certain trusted storm landlords. Arthur Dayne stood at his side while Barristan and Lewin Martell watched from the periphery. The meeting was tense, the flicker of torchlight revealing suspicious glares. But Rhaegar knelt before Eddard Stark the moment he arrived, an act of contrition that stunned the watchers. "My Lord Stark," Rhaegar said, voice thick with emotion. "I offer my deepest regrets for what befell your father and brother. They deserved honor, not the fate they received. If we can come to terms, I will see that justice is done upon my father for his crimes." Eddard Stark's jaw clenched. He glanced at Robert, who stared at Rhaegar with unresolved anger. Then Ned spoke quietly, "I seek justice for my father and brother. I seek the safety of my sister. If these can be secured without further bloodshed, I will listen." Rhaegar nodded. "Lyanna is safe. She is at a secure location, though I cannot reveal it publicly for her own protection. She chose to go there. When the realm is at peace, I will arrange for her to return to you if that is her wish." Robert, impatience burning in his eyes, interjected, "She was promised to me, Targaryen. She was mine to wed. You took her." Rhaegar met his gaze. "I understand your anger, but that is for Lyanna to decide now. If she wishes to return to you, I will not stop her." Ned Stark's voice turned icy. "And if she is with child?" Rhaegar flinched. That was a possibility. He answered evenly, "I will protect her no matter what, but that need not concern the entire realm. Right now, the question is whether we stand together against the true monster in the Red Keep. Will you join me in deposing King Aerys?" A hush settled. Jon Arryn stepped forward, voice measured. "And if you take the throne, my prince, will you do as you say? Will you stand by justice? The realm's faith in Targaryens is broken." Rhaegar's gaze swept the hall. Men from both sides stared at him, judging. He replied, "I will do as I say. I swear upon the memory of my mother and upon all I hold dear. We shall hold a great council where the lords of the realm can oversee the king's removal. Let them witness the trial of Aerys Targaryen. If found guilty, he shall face the punishment the realm deems just." Robert ground his teeth. "Death by the hammer." Jon Arryn looked at Robert sharply. "The realm may vote otherwise." The Stormland lords murmured discontent. Ned Stark, however, studied Rhaegar. He saw sincerity in the prince's eyes, a weariness that suggested Rhaegar hated the horrors his father had unleashed. Slowly, Ned inclined his head. "I will stand with you in bringing a mad king to justice. But once that is done, do not think House Stark will bow lightly. We have lost too much." "That is fair," Rhaegar said quietly. Robert let out a heavy breath. "Gods be good, Ned. Are we truly to make common cause with the Dragon Prince?" He swung a glare at Rhaegar. "If I discover one falsehood, Targaryen, you may cut me down yourself," Rhaegar said. "But first, we must save King's Landing from my father's wildfire. If we delay, the city could burn." Robert's brow furrowed. Eddard gripped Robert's arm, eyes pleading. "Think of how many innocents would die. Is our vengeance worth that?" For a long moment, Robert Baratheon was silent. Then he swore, "Damn you all. I will do it for the realm, not for you, Targaryen." He looked to Jon Arryn. "We will stand together. But if this snake deceives us, I'll break him with my bare hands." A fragile alliance was born that day, sealed not by love or trust, but by necessity. The armies merged, forging a single host that outnumbered any force Aerys could muster in the city. Raven-winged messengers flew to other lords, proclaiming that Prince Rhaegar was leading a coup against the Mad King and seeking support to avoid a massacre in King's Landing. Some lords responded with confusion, others with relief, still others with suspicion. But in the days that followed, a tide began to swell behind Rhaegar's new cause. Men recalled the prince's gentle reputation, his harp playing, his concern for the small folk. Perhaps it was better to have Rhaegar than Robert on the throne. At least he was a Targaryen by blood, but not a monster like Aerys. Thus a new army descended upon the Crownlands, with Robert and Ned riding at the forefront alongside Rhaegar. Many Stormland knights were uneasy marching beneath a Targaryen banner, but the alliance's terms promised them a voice in the new kingdom. The fields near King's Landing turned muddy with the passage of so many boots and hooves. Fearsome rumors drifted from the capital. Aerys had stashed wildfire beneath the Great September of Baelor, beneath the city gates, beneath Flea Bottom. If threatened, he would ignite them all. Rhaegar steeled himself for confrontation. He knew time was running out. If Aerys realized the size of the host approaching, he might light the fuse. Bran watched these events with awe and dread. The arc of history had twisted. The final confrontation was not on the Trident but at the gates of King's Landing itself. Bran prayed that Rhaegar would prevail quickly enough to save the city from the king's madness. When the host reached sight of the city, they found the gates barred, archers on the walls, scorpions and catapults at the ready. King Aerys had barricaded himself within the Red Keep. Tyrion Lannister was not yet a player of great note, and Tywin Lannister had not declared a side. apparently waiting to see which way the wind blew. The besieging force encircled the city. Rhaegar called for a parley with the city watch. Many gold cloaks remembered Rhaegar's courtesy and the seeds of loyalty he had planted. Quiet negotiations opened the smaller gates. Sections of the city watch turned cloaks in Rhaegar's favor, disarming those still loyal to Aerys. Soon, a corridor was opened to let the allied army enter without massive bloodshed. But still, the Red Keep stood like a fortress within the city. Aerys, upon hearing that the city had been entered, howled with fury. He ordered his pyromancers to ignite the caches of wildfire. But the pyromancers hesitated, for the city watch had turned on them. Some were slaughtered in the corridors as they ran with torches. Others were seized, shouting curses. A few barrels of wildfire exploded in distant corners of the city, setting ablaze a handful of streets, but not nearly enough to consume King's Landing. The besieging forces rushed to extinguish the flames as best they could. Barristan Selmy led a contingent of brave knights to stop more ignitions. Thick smoke billowed over a small district near the Dragon Pit. But the city's survival did not end there as Aerys had planned. At last, the final stronghold was the Red Keep itself. Rhaegar led the charge. Robert and Ned were at his side, uneasy allies. They forced the gates, overcame the last line of Targaryen loyalists who remained fanatically devoted to Aerys. Jaime Lannister was found outside the throne room, white cloak stained with blood, a haunted look in his eyes. When Rhaegar asked him what he had done, Jaime said flatly, "The king ordered me to kill my own father if he entered the hall. He wanted me to bring him Tywin's head. Then he said he would burn every last traitor. So I put a sword in his back." A hush fell on them all. Rhaegar approached cautiously. Sure enough, inside the throne room, King Aerys lay sprawled at the base of the Iron Throne, blood pooling around him like a dark halo, his lifeless eyes wide with final madness. For a moment, all was still. The man who had cast such a long shadow across the realm was dead. The city was saved, scarred by partial fires, but not a smoking ruin. The war was over before it truly became a war. Aerys had undone himself with his own cruelty. Rhaegar knelt by his father's body, emotions too tangled for words. Arthur Dayne laid a consoling hand on his shoulder. Robert and Ned stood grimly, each lost in private thoughts. The realm had never seen such a swift, shocking conclusion to a rebellion. Outside, the city trembled with fear and relief. Families that had hidden from the threat of wildfire emerged to find themselves alive and free. Soldiers who had expected a bloody battle found the crown had changed hands without prolonged carnage. The Targaryens, it seemed, would remain on the throne, but not under Aerys' rule. Rhaegar rose, face pale. "We must secure the city. We must see to the people, to the fires, to the wounded. Then we will call a great council. All lords and ladies of the realm shall come. We will show them that justice has been served." His gaze flickered to Robert and Ned. "And we will ensure House Stark receives the reparation it deserves. If Lyanna wishes to return, I will not stop her." Robert's expression was grim. "Your father is dead, but that alone does not wash away the evils he has done. If you break your word, Targaryen, I will not break it," Rhaegar said firmly. "If you wish to see justice done, help me keep order in the city until the council convenes. We must ensure no new tyrant takes his place." Ned Stark placed a hand on Robert's shoulder as though urging calm. For a moment, the enormous man looked ready to argue. Then he sighed. "Fine. I've had enough blood for one day." As dawn broke over King's Landing, the black and red banners of House Targaryen still flew, but it was a new dawn. Rhaegar took command, swiftly establishing the rule of law. He asked Robert and Ned to assist in distributing food from the royal granaries to calm the city's population. Jon Arryn oversaw the gathering of the realm's lords. Step by step, Rhaegar upheld his promises. Brandon and Rhaegar Stark had been avenged, the Mad King lay dead. The pyromancers who participated in his monstrous plans were imprisoned. The city was spared a cataclysmic inferno. House Stark was given a formal apology, and Rhaegar prepared to send an escort to bring Lyanna back if she so chose. He confirmed publicly that the Targaryen reign would continue only if the realm's lords accepted his rule as just and fair. The seeds of a peaceful transition were sown, though many questioned whether such a fragile alliance could hold. In the days that followed, Eddard Stark discovered the location of Lyanna in a tower near Dorne, where she had been sheltered. She was indeed with child, uncertain of her future, but unharmed. The hush that fell over Ned's party when they found her said it all. The Targaryen prince had not lied about her safety. She was confused, torn between her affection for Rhaegar and her memory of Robert, but the realm's new shape allowed her choices she hadn't had before. Word reached King's Landing that Lyanna was alive and resting, and the news went far to soothe the tensions with House Stark. At the Great Council, lords from every corner of Westeros arrived to witness this unprecedented event. The hall rang with debate. Some demanded the entire Targaryen dynasty be abolished. Others insisted that Rhaegar's leadership had saved the city and realm from unimaginable destruction. The Vale, the North, and the Stormlands spoke through Robert, Ned, and Jon Arryn. Though initially furious, Robert admitted that Rhaegar had kept his word so far. The Westerlands remained uncertain, Tywin Lannister calculating as always. The Reach, led by Mace Tyrell, was not hostile to Rhaegar's cause. Dorne, with Elia Martell's ties, stood in solidarity with the prince. The Crownlands themselves were war-weary and relieved to see a more benevolent ruler. Ultimately, the lords voted to recognize Rhaegar Targaryen as king on the condition that certain reforms were enacted, a council of lords to advise on major decisions and end to cruel punishments like burning, and a guarantee that the North and Stormlands would be treated with respect and fairness. Rhaegar agreed wholeheartedly. He stood before them, new crown on his head, and promised an era of justice. The lords called him King Rhaegar, though some still whispered doubts. Yet no one could deny that he had achieved what once seemed impossible, toppling the Mad King without plunging the entire realm into ruin. Robert Baratheon's anger did not vanish overnight. He carried grudges, especially about Lyanna. Yet he found a measure of satisfaction in the vengeance visited upon Aerys. Ned Stark, seeing his sister's condition, felt relief that she was no prisoner. If Lyanna chose to remain with Rhaegar, well, it was her choice, though Robert might never forgive it. Either way, the realm was spared a catastrophic civil war. The White Walkers still stirred beyond the wall, though no one but a distant child named Bran Stark had any inkling of that looming threat. For now, the Seven Kingdoms tasted fragile peace. Bran withdrew from his communion with the past, exhausted. He had done it, he had changed the flow of history. In this new timeline, Rhaegar lived, Aerys died sooner, and Robert's rebellion never consumed Westeros. The young Stark opened his eyes in his own time, heart-pounding. Did that mean the horrors he had known would never come to pass? Or did it mean something else, that new perils might arise? Time was a labyrinth of might-have-beens. Bran felt no immediate answer, only an echo of the weirwood's sighs, as if the old gods were acknowledging his attempt. He wondered whether, in that past, Rhaegar's reign would lead to a stronger realm, better prepared for the long night ahead. Perhaps the dragons of House Targaryen would endure to fight the true darkness. Perhaps the unborn children of Rhaegar and Lyanna would unite ice and fire. The possibilities glimmered like new stars in a twilight sky. In King's Landing, King Rhaegar sat on the Iron Throne. He gazed across the throne room, remembering the day he found his father dead at its base. He thought of the men who had once cried for Targaryen blood, Robert Baratheon, Eddard Stark, Jon Arryn. Now, precariously, they stood as uneasy collaborators, forging a realm that might stand the test of time. It was far from perfect. Distrust lingered. The scars of Aerys' terror festered. But there was a chance, a real chance, for Westeros to be ruled by wisdom instead of fear. Outside, the city slowly returned to life. Markets reopened, merchants hawked wares, small folk whispered about the new king who had dethroned his own father. Some called him the Dragon of Summerhall, for it was at that ruin that he had first made peace with Robert. Others called him the prince who wouldn't burn, for he had saved King's Landing from wildfire. Rhaegar cared little for titles. His heart was set on healing the realm's wounds, on ensuring his children did not inherit a legacy of bitterness. He sent ravens to the Citadel, to the High Septon, to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms, announcing sweeping changes, laws to curb the power of the crown if a king went mad, improved roads and defenses for the North, new alliances with Dorne and the Stormlands. Step by step, he began to rebuild. House Stark returned to Winterfell, mourning the loss of Brandon and Rhaegar, but finding some solace in the knowledge that their deaths had not been in vain. They had toppled a tyrant. Robert Baratheon, after ensuring no more Targaryens threatened him, returned to Storm's End. He carried a bitterness in his soul about Lyanna, but even he could not deny that a stable Targaryen regime, guided by reason, was better for the realm than a drawn-out war. Jon Arryn likewise returned to the Vale, pleased that so few had died compared to what might have been. Dorne celebrated Elia Martell's elevated status as queen consort, forging a stronger bond with the throne. House Martell basked in the knowledge that their loyalty to Rhaegar had paid off. In quiet moments, Rhaegar visited the ruins of the Dragonpit, walking among the ancient bones of dead dragons. He carried a sense that his family's legacy was not simply one of conquest or madness. Perhaps the Targaryens could stand for something else, uniting Westeros, preserving life against the cold darkness. A distant memory of prophecy stirred in him, the promise of a champion against the night. He wondered if that champion would be himself or one of his children or someone else entirely. For the moment, it did not matter. He had done what he must. He had listened to the strange, urgent voice that guided him away from the path of doom. He had chosen hope over despair. And what of Lyanna Stark? She found herself torn between two men, two lives. She retreated to Winterfell at first, seeking solitude. In time she might speak her truth, that her heart was drawn to Rhaegar for reasons beyond mere fancy, that she had loved the gentleness beneath his noble bearing. Perhaps she would choose to stay with him, forging a secret alliance between Stark and Targaryen. Or perhaps she would decide to remain in the north, free from the burdens of royal life. That choice would be hers alone. The realm no longer demanded her sacrifice or her forced marriage. Freedom in its own quiet way was the first fruit of a new era. In the darkness of the grove, Bran Stark felt the weirwood roots withdraw from his mind. The pale bark glimmered with the tears of red sap. He stumbled back, startled to find himself once more in his own time, older, changed. Yet a part of him lingered in that altered past where Rhaegar Targaryen sat the Iron Throne, where the realm avoided a war that would have fractured it. He wondered if that timeline truly existed somewhere, or if it was only a vision of possibility. In the end, all he could do was hope that he had planted the seed of a kinder fate. For King Rhaegar, the days turned into weeks, weeks into months, as he stabilized his reign. The small folk grew used to a king who did not order burnings or publicly deride them. Trade recovered from the brief conflict. Lannisport, Old Town, Gull Town, White Harbor, all the major ports bustled. A new sense of possibility flourished. Of course, pockets of resistance remained. Some Targaryen loyalists could not forgive him for dethroning his father. Some Northerners and Stormlanders seethed that a Targaryen still wore the crown. Yet the possibility of peace overshadowed these grumblings. Late one evening, as Rhaegar strummed his harp in the royal solar, a soft wind blew through the open window, rustling the tapestries. He stopped playing, sensing that ghostly presence. He heard a faint whisper, a child's voice, filled with relief and wonder. "Thank you." Rhaegar looked around, heart pounding. He saw only the moonlight. Yet a gentle warmth suffused his spirit, and he found himself whispering back, though no one was there, "No, thank you." He resumed his harp, playing a gentle melody that drifted out across the rooftops of King's Landing. The notes carried hope into the night, as if weaving a new song for a realm that might never face the horrors of unrestrained rebellion, that might be spared the heartbreak of families torn apart. Far away, in the vastness of the old god's domain, Bran Stark smiled through tears. Some stories, it seemed, could be rewritten if only someone cared enough to whisper across the centuries and warn a prince about the fire that threatened to engulf them all. And so it was, in that branch of fate's great tree, that Robert's rebellion was stilled by a single act of mercy, and the Seven Kingdoms lived on beneath the quiet promise of a better tomorrow. Rhaegar woke before dawn, his heart fluttering with the uneasy quiet that often stole over him in recent weeks. He rose from bed and stepped onto the small balcony that overlooked the city. Gray light stretched along the eastern horizon, revealing King's Landing beneath a gentle haze. Thin columns of smoke drifted upward from a handful of chimney stacks, drifting and curling in that sleepy, tentative way that promised the city was slowly returning to its mundane routines. Though it had been months since the day they stormed the Red Keep and found King Aerys lying dead at the foot of the throne, the memory remained painfully vivid. That final confrontation had saved King's Landing from wildfire, from a war that could have lasted years. Yet in the aftermath, the crown still lay heavy on Rhaegar's brow. He let the pre-dawn breeze wash over him, carrying the sense of salt and mud from the Blackwater Bay. The city was safer now, at least from the immediate threat of civil war, but hidden perils lingered in every shadow. Some of Aerys's old retainers had melted away, slipping into obscurity or fleeing overseas. Fragments of the old king's secrets might still lie scattered in dungeons or hidden storehouses, barrels of wildfire waiting for a stray spark. Even if those lurking disasters never emerged, Rhaegar had a realm to rebuild. He felt the burden acutely each morning as he stood at this balcony and reminded himself that all his efforts, the alliances, the entreaties, the reforms aimed to protect the people below. His father's cruelty had ended. Now, the test of Rhaegar's convictions would begin in earnest. He dressed quietly, selecting a subdued tunic of black velvet embroidered with a single silver dragon over his heart. He was king, yes, but he did not want to overwhelm the court with Targaryen finery as Aerys once had, flaunting the emblem of dragons in gold and rubies. Better to show himself as a man of humble devotion to the realm. The hustle of the Red Keep had already begun by the time he left his chambers. Servants bustled about carrying platters or jugs of fresh water for washing. The Targaryen banners along the corridors fluttered in the early breeze that slipped through open windows. Guards bowed their heads as he passed, their eyes held respect, but also uncertainty. He smiled politely, acknowledging them, determined to maintain an approachable air. He made his way to a smaller audience chamber rather than the grand throne room, which still felt too steeped in grisly memories of his father. The smaller hall had rows of benches for courtiers and supplicants, with a modest dais at the front where a single chair of carved oak awaited the king. A large stained-glass window let in beams of morning light. In that warm, mottled sunshine, Rhaegar held informal audiences with petitioners and lords who came with grievances, requests, or offers. It was part of his effort to humanize the monarchy, to demonstrate that the Targaryen line would no longer stand behind iron doors and unapproachable arrogance. He arrived early, but a handful of people were already gathered. Grand Maester Pycelle sat on one of the benches, bent over a parchment that fluttered slightly in the breeze. A pair of young knights in the royal livery waited near the dais. Arthur Dayne was there too, which heartened Rhaegar. Arthur's presence had become a mainstay of calm amidst turmoil. The Sword of the Morning wore his white Kingsguard cloak with pride, dawn sheathed at his side. When Rhaegar entered, Arthur inclined his head in a gesture more friendly than formal. "Good morning, Your Grace," Arthur said softly, the corner of his mouth curving in a faint smile. In private, he still used Rhaegar's name at times, but here in public, he gave the customary deference. "Good morning," Rhaegar replied, stepping onto the dais and settling into the chair. "You're here early." "I wanted to speak before the crush of the day begins," Arthur said. "There has been news from Dorne. Elia Martell, Queen Elia, had traveled south recently to see her family to reassure Prince Doran that House Martell's loyalty remained secure and that Rhaegar's reign would not overlook Dorne's needs. With the entire realm shifting in the aftermath of Aerys' fall, Dorne's position was important, and it was also personal. Elia was queen, their children were Targaryen heirs, and House Martell's unwavering support had proven critical when the rebellion threatened. Rhaegar's gaze sharpened. "What news?" Arthur looked pleased. "They've solidified their muster. Dorne stands ready to lend additional forces if you require them. It seems they're concerned about the Westerlands." Rhaegar nodded. Tywin Lannister had offered an ambiguous stance thus far. He had not openly opposed Rhaegar. In fact, Tywin had never marched for Robert once it became clear that Rhaegar was forging an alliance with so many major houses. But Tywin's measured neutrality was unnerving. With Aerys gone, Tywin's old grudge might be either softened or worsened. Tywin had once served as the hand of the king, only to be dismissed and humiliated by the Mad King. Now Rhaegar had to decide if he would court Tywin's alliance or risk leaving House Lannister estranged from the Iron Throne. "We might need Dorne's support soon," Rhaegar said quietly. "One way or another, I must speak with Lord Tywin. But I'd rather gather more intelligence before I approach him." He then paused, glancing over at Pycelle, who set his parchment aside and rose carefully. Grand Maester Pycelle cleared his throat. "Your Grace, I have a message from the Citadel. They have invited your personal presence to witness a rare astronomical event in a few moons' time. Of course, it's a courtesy to you as the new king, but they also mentioned that you might address several maesters about your new policies. It could be an excellent chance to fortify ties with the Citadel." Pycelle's voice dripped with an unctuous formality, as though he strove to align himself with the new regime. Rhaegar was aware that Pycelle had served Aerys for decades, though how sincerely he served was questionable. Still, to keep stability, Rhaegar tolerated him. "I'll consider it," Rhaegar replied. "But the realm's immediate needs must come first. For now, we'll send a gracious reply, thanking them for the invitation." He turned to Arthur. "I expect Robert or Ned Stark will be sending more ravens soon. I want to know if we can rely on them to maintain local order in the Stormlands and the North. Our truce is still uneasy." Arthur inclined his head. "I'll keep watch for any dispatches." Just then, the day's first audience was admitted, a minor lord from the Crownlands who spoke of bandits harassing the road between Rosby and Duskendale. Rhaegar listened, asked measured questions, and promised that the Crown would send a patrol. Over the following hours, other matters poured in: a dispute over a small inheritance, a complaint about increased taxes levied under Aerys that had yet to be rescinded, rumors of hedge knights raiding villages under the guise of the rebellious cause. Rhaegar handled each request calmly, mindful that his father's legacy of terror had left many corners of the realm uncertain about who truly held power. By midday he felt mentally exhausted, but a certain satisfaction hummed in his veins. This was what kings were meant to do: serve, decide, and keep peace. After the last petitioner left, Rhaegar stepped down from the dais, rolling his stiff shoulders. Arthur approached, offering him a water skin. Rhaegar accepted it gratefully, taking a long sip. "Thank you," he murmured, handing it back. "You wear yourself thin," Arthur said quietly. "You cannot listen to the entire realm personally." "Perhaps not," Rhaegar conceded, "but I need them to see that I'm not some distant tyrant. The realm must know there is a difference between my father's rule and mine." Arthur's gaze turned sympathetic. "No one doubts the difference, my friend. But do save some strength for more important decisions. Even the best king needs rest." Before Rhaegar could answer, a young squire, pale and breathless, rushed into the chamber. "Your Grace, there's a matter in the yard." A man arrived. He claims to be from House Targaryen overseas. Rhaegar stiffened. House Targaryen overseas could only mean exiles, distant kin from Essos, or perhaps a pretender hoping to stir trouble. During Aerys's last days, some minor branches of the Targaryen family had indeed taken flight or hidden themselves. It was rumored that 1 or 2 Targaryen cousins had lived in exile for years. Rhaegar glanced at Arthur. "Let's see," he said. They left the chamber and followed the squire down winding corridors, passing cautious guards who bowed in deference. Eventually, they emerged into the Red Keep's courtyard, a broad expanse of cobblestones bright with midday sun. There, near the stables, stood a wiry man in travel-stained attire of black and red. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with thinning silver hair pulled back in a short tail. His cloak had the faint outline of a 3-headed dragon, but it looked pearly embroidered, as if done hastily. At his side, he clutched a battered satchel. Guards surrounded him, uncertain. When he saw Rhaegar, the man bowed, face etched with intense fervor. "Your Grace," he said, voice trembling. "I have come from Pentos, from the household of Magister Illyrio Mopatis. I carried with me word of a Targaryen lineage in hiding, but I see you are enthroned." He almost smiled. "Forgive me, but the rumors across the narrow sea said King Aerys was dead and Robert Baratheon took the throne. This is wondrous news indeed." Rhaegar studied him carefully. "Who are you?" "I am Meleys Waters, once a scribe in the service of King Aerys before I fled during the darkest years of his reign. I took refuge in Pentos. When I heard that a rebellion had begun, I feared the worst, that the Targaryen line had been wiped out. Illyrio Mopatis knew I had once served the crown, so he sent me to learn the truth. There are those in Essos who still support House Targaryen, though in quiet ways." Rhaegar exchanged a look with Arthur. He recalled hearing that certain wealthy magisters in Pentos had meddled in Westerosi affairs in the past. "Well, as you can see, the Targaryen line remains," Rhaegar said. "Tell Illyrio Mopatis that King Rhaegar sits the Iron Throne, by consent of the realm's lords. My father indeed met his end, but the war concluded quickly. There's no need for exiled Targaryens to remain hidden, assuming they swear fealty to me and do not seek to cause chaos." Meleys Waters dropped to his knee with theatrical reverence. "Your Grace, I shall deliver the news. There is talk in Pentos that some distant Targaryen princess or cousin might still live, perhaps seeking alliances. But with you on the throne, such talk is moot. All hail King Rhaegar." He bowed so low that his nose nearly touched the cobblestones. Rhaegar remained cautious, uncertain if the man's sincerity was genuine or if he carried some hidden agenda. Still, turning him away might be unwise. "Stay for a time at the Red Keep as my guest. I will have my steward see to your needs." He signaled to a nearby guard who approached. "Ensure Master Meleys is given quarters." Then, to Meleys, he added, "When you write to Illyrio, you may express my gratitude if he truly meant to support House Targaryen." Meleys seemed delighted. "Indeed, Your Grace. You are most generous." He left with the guard practically floating with relief. Arthur leaned closer, voice low. "This could be nothing, or it could be something. I keep an eye on him." Rhaegar nodded. "I will. For now, I doubt Pentos poses much threat. But the last thing we need is more meddling from overseas." A small sigh escaped him. He wanted peace, a chance to rebuild. Yet he knew he must be vigilant. The crown might be more stable than before, but the realm was not so secure that conspiracies from Essos or anywhere else could be ignored. He turned from the courtyard and returned to the keep's corridors. It was nearly time for his midday meal, a simple affair he took in private with whichever family members were present. But today only a few courtiers lingered. His wife, Elia, had not yet returned from Dorne. She'd taken their 2 young children, Rhaenys and Aegon, to visit the water gardens for a respite from the tension in King's Landing. Rhaegar missed them fiercely. The Red Keep felt emptier without their laughter. He hoped they'd come back soon, though he also understood the value in letting them avoid the city's unsettled climate until Rhaegar's new rule was more firmly established. He settled in the solar that served as a small dining chamber, receiving a bowl of stew and a heel of fresh bread from a courteous steward. Barristan Selmy arrived as well with his usual quiet grace. Ser Barristan had been busy overseeing additional training for the city watch, ensuring that no pockets of loyalty to the Mad King remained. Rhaegar gestured for him to join. The older knight inclined his head in thanks. They ate in near silence at first, fatigue weighing on them both. Eventually Barristan said, "Your Grace, I hear that the roads are safer near Rosby. The bandits have fled." "That is well done." "Good," Rhaegar said, stirring his stew. "Small improvements here and there. Sometimes I wonder how long it will take before the entire realm recovers from the damage. But at least each day brings a little progress." Barristan's expression turned thoughtful. "Is it true you intend to summon Tywin Lannister to a formal audience?" "I must," Rhaegar answered. "He's too powerful to leave in limbo. The rumors that he's massing swords in the Westerlands worry me. If he decides to challenge my authority, the cost could be high." Barristan nodded. "I served under him when he was Hand of the King. He's shrewd, but he values stability and wealth above all. He hated your father's erratic ways, especially as the king humiliated him in public more than once. Perhaps a show of respect from you will smooth things." Rhaegar considered. "I plan to invite him to King's Landing with full honors. I'll ask that he act as my hand or at least as an advisor. We can't rule alone. Grand Maester Pycelle is too much a toady, Varys is cunning but can't be fully trusted, and the other lords are either too new to their titles or still uncertain about my reign. Tywin might resent what happened in the past, but if I can persuade him we are forging a new era, he might join me willingly." Barristan's brow creased slightly. "Yes, but be careful. Lord Tywin is not the sort of man to serve unless he sees advantage. And watch for any demands he might make about Cersei or Jaime." "Yes." Rhaegar recalled that Cersei Lannister had once been considered a potential bride for him long before he married Elia Martell. The Mad King's cruelty toward Tywin had derailed that arrangement. "If Tywin thinks to bind our families by marrying my children to his, we'll have to see if it benefits the realm. We already have a Martell alliance and the realm is large. Who knows? Perhaps some compromise can be reached." He paused, finished the last of his bread, and set the spoon aside. "Will you stand with me if negotiations become complicated?" Barristan gave a faint smile. "Always, Your Grace. I've pledged my sword to you. And though I have respect for Tywin's capabilities, I remember how he sacked the city after the gates opened to him." He broke off as they both recalled that in another version of events, one that never happened in this timeline but that Rhaegar had glimpsed in half-understood dreams, Tywin had indeed taken King's Landing by treachery, leading to the deaths of many Targaryens. Bran Stark, in his distant vantage, might have recalled how that had once been the final downfall of House Targaryen. But that reality had not come to pass. Here, in this changed path, Rhaegar had dethroned Aerys before Tywin made his move, preventing the sack of the city altogether. "He is dangerous," Rhaegar said softly, "but so are many who hold power. I will treat him as an equal partner, not as an underling." Barristan nodded. "Wise." They concluded the meal with a firm resolve. Tywin Lannister would be invited forthwith on terms of courtesy. Rhaegar summoned a scribe to draft the formal letter. He would request Tywin's presence at court within the next few moons to attend a gathering of the small council and to discuss the final shape of the new regime. If Tywin refused, it would be telling. If he came, it would be an opportunity to bring the Westerlands fully under the king's banner. In the days that followed, Rhaegar oversaw the restoration of neglected parts of the Red Keep. Much of the fortress had fallen into disrepair under Aerys, who was more interested in wildfire caches than living quarters. Masons chipped away at battered walls, carpenters replaced broken beams, while stonemasons repaved cracked floors. The clang of hammers echoed day and night, but Rhaegar endured the noise, believing it symbolic. The monarchy itself was undergoing repair. During that same period, he discovered multiple hidden chambers once used by the Mad King for storing wildfire or for tormenting traitors. Rhaegar ordered them emptied, their contraband destroyed. He posted loyal guards to ensure that no lingering traces of Aerys' madness would resurface. As the weeks rolled on, letters arrived from Robert Baratheon, curt but respectful. Robert had encountered pockets of resistance, storm landlords who had grown uneasy about his cooperation with a Targaryen king, and he demanded reaffirmation of the new alliance. Rhaegar responded with promises that the Stormlands would receive no less respect than any other region. He invited Robert to King's Landing to stand as a valued counselor, if not hand. Robert's reply was noncommittal. I'll come if it suits me, Targaryen, but I make no promises. Rhaegar sighed upon reading it. Arthur Dayne assured him that so long as Robert was left alone to rule the Stormlands, he would not stir new rebellion. Eddard Stark, however, wrote more warmly. He thanked the king for ensuring that the men responsible for Brandon Stark's death had faced justice posthumously in Aerys's case. He also wrote that Lyanna Stark was gradually recovering her health after the birth of a child, a boy she named Jon in secret. She remained in the north for now, uncertain of her future. Rhaegar breathed relief that Lyanna was safe and that the boy was well. The truth of Jon's parentage was a delicate matter. For the time being, it might be better for the realm if that truth remained private. Ned hinted that Lyanna's affections for Rhaegar were complicated but had not entirely died. Still, she did not wish to impose upon the king's marriage or create further tension with Robert. Rhaegar respected her decision, though he felt a pang each time he thought of her solitary life far from him. A month after sending the invitation, Tywin Lannister's retinue approached King's Landing. The approach was heralded by outriders announcing that the Lord of Casterly Rock traveled with a large escort of cavalry as well as banners displaying the Golden Lion. Tension rippled through the capital. Some worried that Tywin meant to seize the city by force, but Rhaegar had faith that he would not start a conflict he was unlikely to win. Nonetheless, Rhaegar prepared the city watch and posted archers on the walls as a precaution. King's Landing had been burned once in living memory. There would be no second chance for such a calamity. On the appointed morning, Rhaegar donned a formal black cloak pinned with a silver dragon, and he led a small procession to greet Lord Tywin at the Iron Gate. Arthur Dayne, Barristan Selmy, and Lewin Martell accompanied him, their white cloaks billowing. The city streets were crowded with onlookers, some curious, some wary. When Tywin Lannister arrived, he rode at the head of a formidable column of red and gold knights. His hair, once golden, had begun to streak with silver, but his posture remained rigid, face set in a mask of austere pride. Behind him, the Lannister lion banner fluttered in the morning light. Tywin dismounted gracefully, followed by his retinue. He bowed just enough to be polite. Rhaegar inclined his head in response. They measured each other silently for a moment, each aware of the gravity of this meeting. The onlookers whispered. Then Rhaegar said in a clear voice, "Lord Tywin, I welcome you to King's Landing and thank you for heeding my invitation." Tywin replied in a voice that carried easily over the hush. "Your Grace, the invitation of a king is not to be ignored. I present myself and my household ready to discuss what is best for the realm." Rhaegar studied him. Tywin's green eyes were cool, revealing little. "The Red Keep is yours. We will speak in council at once." With that, he escorted Tywin and his knights through the city streets. The watchers parted, some cheering, others sullen. A few remembered how Tywin had once marched on King's Landing, but that was in another time, one that had never come to pass here. In this changed future, he arrived as a guest. Within the Red Keep, Rhaegar had arranged a formal reception in the Great Hall, not the throne room, for the main talks. A table draped in crimson cloth had been laid out with wine, bread, and fruit. Lords of the Crownlands, some Tyrell envoys, and select members of the small council were present. Tywin took his seat at the table with measured dignity, removing his gloves and folding them neatly. Rhaegar sat at the head, with Arthur Dayne and Barristan standing guard. "Lord Tywin," Rhaegar began, "I've asked for your counsel. The realm emerges from a grave crisis, my father's tyranny and a near war that could have destroyed us all. We now seek to rebuild. I offer you a role on the small council or, if you accept, the hand of the king. Your reputation as a proven administrator cannot be denied. The question is whether you wish to stand by the Iron Throne in this new era." Tywin sipped his wine slowly, setting the cup aside with care. "Your Grace is forthright. I appreciate that. My decision, however, rests on whether the new era truly rectifies the old injustices. King Aerys once cast aside my service after I devoted years to running the kingdom's affairs. He humiliated me, and I have not forgotten." A subtle edge laced his tone, though he kept it meticulously polite. "Why should I trust that House Targaryen will treat me with more respect this time?" Rhaegar clasped his hands. "Because I am not my father. I do not treat loyal service as a toy to be discarded. Name your terms. If they are just, I'll see them met." A faint flicker of approval crossed Tywin's face, though he did not let it show too strongly. "Very well. I would have certain assurances for my house. We Lannisters have no interest in unseating you if we are granted influence in court and the right to fortify our trade routes. We want the Rock's finances unhampered by arbitrary taxes or seizures. And I would see my family recognized in any new alliances. My children, Cersei and Jaime, must be offered suitable status. Your Grace already has a queen in Elia Martell, but future marriages might be arranged. My son Tyrion also requires your protection. He was born different. A flicker of distaste quickly masked. But he is still my son. Rhaegar took this in, his expression neutral. He knew well that Tywin's love for his children was complicated, especially regarding Tyrion. But Tywin rarely allowed personal feelings to overshadow his ambition for House Lannister. The realm is large and alliances can be formed in many ways, Rhaegar said. My own children are still very young, Rhaenys and Aegon. There's also the matter of my half-siblings, if any survived, or my other kin. But let's keep such matches open as possibilities. Regarding trade routes, I see no reason to hinder fair commerce. If you truly wish to see the realm prosper, we share that interest. As for your finances, so long as the crown's obligations are met, I do not intend to plunder the Westerlands. My father's days of oppressive taxation ended with him. Tywin listened carefully, giving a small nod. Then we have the basis of an understanding. I accept the position of Hand of the King if your grace so honors me. An exhalation of relief passed through the gathered lords. Tension eased from the air. Some recognized that Rhaegar had effectively avoided the threat of a second major conflict by bringing Tywin into the fold. With the Westerlands, the Stormlands, the North, and Dorne all aligned, at least tenuously, the realm had a chance of genuine stability. Tyrells and Arryns were also likely to remain loyal under these circumstances. Excellent, Rhaegar said with a gracious tilt of his head. I name you Hand of the King, Lord Tywin. May we rule wisely together. Servants brought forward a pin shaped like a golden hand, the symbol of the office. Tywin rose and accepted it with measured solemnity. Applause fluttered in the hall, though some faces looked anxious. Tywin's ruthless reputation lingered in memory. But if Rhaegar intended to create an environment where skill and law prevailed, Tywin would find a place to thrive without cruelty, or so Rhaegar hoped. After the ceremony, the assembled lords and councillors began to disperse. Rhaegar invited Tywin to walk with him through the courtyard so they might talk in private about the next steps. Arthur Dayne followed at a respectful distance, silent but vigilant. As they strolled beneath the bright midday sun, Rhaegar kept his voice low. Our next challenge is ensuring the realm's security. We ended the threat of a large-scale rebellion, but smaller rebellions might spring up in the future. Some houses still resent Targaryen rule. Others worry that I might revert to my father's ways. I need your steady hand to reassure them. Tywin nodded. I will see to it. We'll reorganize the crown's finances, pay off any lingering debts that might cause friction, and ensure the lords receive fair treatment in terms of trade and taxes. That will do more to secure their loyalty than any speech. We must also keep a close watch on the Iron Islands. They are perpetually restless. Balon Greyjoy might sense weakness in this transitional period. Rhaegar frowned. Yes. I'll send a message to Pike, reminding Lord Greyjoy of his obligations. I'd prefer not to spark conflict with the Ironborn, but if they raid the western coasts, we must respond swiftly. They walked on, Rhaegar's gaze straying toward the distant spires of the Dragon Pit. Those ancient ruins reminded him of House Targaryen's diminished state. Once they had dragons, once they had soared above all. Now they had only memory. Perhaps that was for the best, the realm had enough cause for fear without living dragons. Yet part of Rhaegar's heart still ached with the old dream that a Targaryen might one day restore that majesty. Prophecies he had read since boyhood still simmered in his thoughts, the prince that was promised, the song of ice and fire. He had begun to suspect that child might be one of his own or perhaps Lyanna's child in the north. Either way, Rhaegar needed a stable realm if any champion was to arise to defend it. Are you content with the direction we take? Rhaegar asked Tywin at last, quietly. Or do you still harbor doubts? Tywin's pale eyes flicked to him. A king who values counsel is rare. Let us say I am cautiously content. If you keep to your word, you will find me a loyal hand. Rhaegar inclined his head, accepting the measured support. Very well. Let us move forward together. So began a new chapter in King's Landing. Tywin Lannister took up residence in the Tower of the Hand, bringing with him a small retinue of Lannister bannermen and advisors. He quickly reorganized the accounts of the crown, cutting unnecessary expenditures, negotiating trade deals with Pentos, and re-establishing strong ties with Bravos for financing. Rhaegar admired Tywin's efficiency, though he tried to temper the older man's more draconian impulses. Meanwhile, Rhaegar continued to hold audiences aided by a slowly expanding small council that included lords from various regions, each chosen for skill rather than sycophancy. During these months, Robert Baratheon made a brief appearance in King's Landing. He arrived with a handful of Stormland knights wearing the sigil of the crown stag. His presence caused a stir among the populace since many remembered that Robert had once been the face of rebellion. Some spat curses under their breath or eyed him warily. Others regarded him with admiration, for Robert's exploits in the field were legendary, though the final war never truly erupted. Rhaegar received him politely in the smaller audience chamber, with Tywin Lannister standing by his hand. Robert's eyes swept across the room, pausing on Tywin with a hint of disdain before settling on Rhaegar. "I see the Lannister has wasted no time in wrapping himself around your throne." Tywin's face remained unmoved, though a muscle in his jaw twitched. Rhaegar answered calmly, "He is the hand of the king, chosen for his administrative acumen. You have your seat in the Stormlands, Lord Robert. I trust all is well there." Robert shrugged. "Bandits, petty disputes, all the usual. I handle them as I see fit. We have no further reason to lift arms against you for now. I came to see how the city fares. The talk at Storm's End is that the capital's under new management." He cast a sardonic glance at Tywin. "Does your new manager also decide who will be in your bed, or is that left to the Martells?" Tywin's composure crackled with cold ire, but Rhaegar raised a hand, forestalling conflict. "Lord Robert," Rhaegar said gently, though his voice had steel beneath, "you are welcome here as a lord of the realm and as one who helped us bring an end to my father's tyranny. But let us speak plainly. If you have grievances, name them. Insults gain us nothing." Robert's mouth twisted. He glanced aside, perhaps recalling that the last time he and Rhaegar had faced each other with that level of tension was on the field outside Summerhall when war had nearly exploded. "Fine," he muttered. "I came to see if you've truly changed. If you truly mean to keep your father's madness buried. I hear the city is calmer, that taxes aren't as monstrous as they were. Maybe that's enough for the moment." Rhaegar hesitated, a pang of regret for the enmity between them. "I intend to keep my promises. House Baratheon's rights will not be infringed upon, nor will House Stark's or House Aaron's. My father left the realm in ruin, but with the help of men like you, we can rebuild. If you want a role here, some official capacity, say so, and I will consider it." He wondered if Robert, for all his bitterness, might find satisfaction in a new duty, or if he would chafe at the idea of serving under a Targaryen. Robert shook his head. "I prefer the Stormlands. I'm not a courtier. Leave me to my hunts, my feasts, and my men. When the realm needs a strong arm, call me. I'll answer if it suits me." His smirk held a hint of challenge. Tywin opened his mouth, but again Rhaegar raised a calming hand. "Very well. Enjoy your time here. The city is open to you." Robert left not long after, spending only a few days in King's Landing before riding back to Storm's End. He drank copious amounts of ale in the local taverns, brawled with a few city guards who recognized him, then departed. Rhaegar could only watch from afar, wishing that Robert's fierce resentment might one day cool. But as long as Robert stayed in his own lands and did not incite further unrest, perhaps that was enough. Summer approached. The days grew longer and the air around King's Landing thickened with heat. Rhaegar found himself longing for the cooler nights of Dragonstone or even the breezes of the Vale. Still, he remained in the capital, determined not to abandon his responsibilities. To his relief, Elia Martell returned from Dorne, arriving on a river barge that traveled the Rose Road with a small escort. She emerged radiant under the sun, clad in flowing Dornish silks. At her side were the children, Rhaenys and Aegon, both gawking at the city they had left behind months earlier. Rhaenys, spirited as ever, ran to her father as soon as the barge docked, demanding to be carried. Aegon, younger, clung shyly to Elia, though he smiled when Rhaegar leaned down to greet him. Elia's dark eyes shone with relief as Rhaegar embraced her. "The city seems more at peace," she said softly. "And you look tired." "I am," Rhaegar admitted. "But your presence makes it easier. Come, I'll show you the improvements." Over the next few days, he walked with Elia through the refurbished corridors of the Red Keep. She expressed surprise at the lack of gloom that once pervaded the fortress under Aerys's reign. Children's laughter echoed in hallways once haunted by the screams of prisoners. Servants were no longer fearful of savage punishments. Elia's gentle heart found joy in each sign of new life. One evening they dined privately in a solar overlooking the city. Rhaenys dozed in Elia's lap, worn out from chasing cats around the castle, while Aegon babbled in a high chair. Rhaegar watched his children with a heart that felt full yet also pricked by guilt. He sometimes thought of Jon, Lyanna's child in the north. He had not shared that secret with Elia, not fully. It was a delicate matter and he wanted no shadows to darken their marriage. Still, it weighed on him. As if sensing his mood, Elia took his hand across the table. "You've done so much already," she said, voice warm. The realm is calmer, the people speak of King Rhaegar in hopeful tones. In Dorne, they are proud to call you their king as well as their son by marriage. You cannot fix every ill at once. He squeezed her hand gently. I know. But sometimes I fear that a single misstep could unravel all we've built. Robert's grudges, Tywin's ambitions, the resentments from my father's supporters, any one of these could light a spark. Elia leaned forward, brushing a strand of silver hair from his cheek. You are not alone. Dorne stands with you, as do House Tyrell, House Arryn, House Stark, and more. Even House Baratheon and House Lannister have found places in your realm, if not with unwavering devotion, then with acceptance. Have faith in what you've accomplished. He exhaled, a small smile forming. Thank you. I needed to hear that. He shifted his gaze to his son. Aegon was picking at a piece of bread with chubby fingers, occasionally glancing up at his father with bright curiosity. Rhaegar's heart squeezed. Perhaps Aegon or Rhaenys might one day be the child of prophecy, the one who would unite the realm in its darkest hour. They would grow into a stronger kingdom if he could hold it together now. Late that night, after tucking the children into their beds, Rhaegar found himself restless. He took his harp and slipped through the corridors to a small courtyard garden. A tall weirwood sapling grew there, a rare sight so far south, transplanted by some earlier Targaryen generations. The white bark glistened in the moonlight. Rhaegar sat on a bench and began to strum his harp, letting the soft notes fill the air. He recalled an old ballad of the north about a maiden who danced with a ghost. The music twined with the hush of the garden, broken only by the faint chirping of night insects. As he played, he felt once more that strange sensation of being watched by an unseen presence. It no longer frightened him. Long ago, he had come to believe that some deeper magic connected him to certain forces beyond mortal comprehension. Perhaps it was the old gods, or the memory of them, or the souls that lingered in the weirwood trees. He let his music flow as if in conversation with that presence, as though to say, thank you for guiding me this far. If ever I falter, guide me again. In some distant place of roots and ancient memories, Bran Stark listened, though he was not physically there. His spirit, bound to the weirwood net, felt the gentle strains of the harp. He understood that Rhaegar's choices had changed the world in ways that would ripple outward for generations. The Game of Thrones was calmer, the realm less fractured. Yet winter was inevitable and the White Walkers would one day stir again. Bran hoped that this peace would give Westeros the unity it needed when that time came. For now, though, the realm rested in an uneasy but real peace. Through the weirwood, Bran offered no words, only quiet support, content that he had done what he could. Days flowed into weeks, then months. Under Tywin's direction, roads were repaired, coin flowed more freely in trade, and the city's defenses were strengthened, not through hidden wildfire caches but through well-maintained walls and disciplined watchmen. The realm's lords arrived one by one for audiences or small councils, forging pacts that gave them a voice in the new government. Even the Iron Islands remained quiescent for the moment, with Balon Greyjoy apparently biding his time. Some muttered that a Targaryen king with a Lannister hand was an unnatural partnership, but the results were undeniable: fewer bandit raids, stable coin, and the hush of prolonged warfare replaced by local feuds that rarely escalated. Rhaegar's biggest internal struggle lay with how to handle the truth of Jon's parentage. Ned Stark had written that Lyanna's child grew strong, dark-haired, with gray eyes that could flash with surprising intensity. He said that the boy sometimes cried at night as if haunted by unknown fears. Lyanna occasionally played the harp, Rhaegar's harp, which he had lent her in secret to soothe him. Reading that letter had nearly undone Rhaegar. He wanted to claim the boy publicly, to unite him with his half-siblings, Rhaenys and Aegon. But that would be politically explosive, perhaps fueling Robert's wrath and sowing strife with House Martell. With a heavy heart, Rhaegar wrote Ned that it might be best for Jon to remain in the north, at least until the realm was so stable that no one could use the child's existence as a weapon. Ned, ever honorable, agreed, though he insisted that Rhaegar at least acknowledge the boy's father was not some unknown scoundrel. Rhaegar promised that one day he would. In private, he confided part of the truth to Elia. She listened quietly, face somber, as he explained that Lyanna had borne him a son. He expected anger or betrayal, but Elia's eyes reflected something more compassionate than condemnation. I knew of your bond with her, Elia said softly. I was not blind to it. She has her reasons for what she did. You have yours. The realm's safety demanded you keep it hidden. She let out a trembling breath. I won't pretend it doesn't hurt me to know you share a child with another woman, but I see your heart, Rhaegar. You carry a sense of prophecy, a sense that your lineage matters deeply. If you believe that child is part of it, then so be it. I only ask that you not abandon our children in your quest. He kissed her hand, tears in his eyes. Never. Aegon and Rhaenys are my beloved children, just as you are my beloved wife. Jon is also precious to me, but the realm demands caution. Elia nodded, blinking away her own tears. Then we will find a way forward, in time. Word eventually spread, in whispers, that Lyanna Stark's son might have Targaryen blood. Rumors rippled through tavern corners and lordly halls. Never confirmed, never denied. Most people shrugged it off as idle gossip. House Martell, for its part, chose not to make a fuss. They respected Elia's stance. If their princess forgave Rhaegar, that was enough, provided the boy did not threaten her children's claim. And Rhaegar had no intention of muddying the succession. He believed that if the realm was stable, the details of who fathered Jon Stark would not tear the kingdom apart. By the time autumn leaves turned gold and red, the realm had found a surprising equilibrium. Rhaegar traveled on progress with Elia and the children, visiting key seats to showcase the unity of the crown. They went to High Garden, where Mace Tyrell hosted lavish feasts among the roses. The Tyrells expressed relief that no war had ravaged their fields. They swore anew their loyalty to the Targaryen monarchy. Passing through the Reach's fertile lands, Rhaegar marveled at how easily they might have burned had war truly broken out. At every stop, he spoke of forging a lasting peace. Further along, they visited Old Town, where the High Septon blessed Rhaegar's reign officially in the grand September. Thousands thronged the streets, waving dragon banners. Elia rode in a litter behind him, children at her side, both wide-eyed at the spectacle of the city. Upon visiting the citadel, Rhaegar met maesters who recorded the realm's history, men who had once watched with dread as Aerys slid into madness. Now they greeted Rhaegar with quiet admiration. Some timidly asked him about his rumored interest in prophecy, but he only smiled and said he left such mysteries to the gods' domain. When they turned northward, the air grew cooler, the nights crisp. Rhaegar had hoped to visit Winterfell to speak in person with Ned Stark and perhaps see Jon, but word came that Ned and many northern lords had gone to quell an uprising of wildlings near the wall. Rhaegar debated whether to travel that far, but caution advised otherwise. He left a token gift for House Stark at a secure holdfast along the road, fine steel for Ned's use and a new library of books. Then, turning east, the royal progress crossed the Trident, that fateful river where, in another world, Rhaegar had met his doom under Robert's warhammer. Now it was peaceful farmland, dotted with small villages. Elia, sensing Rhaegar's brooding mood, took his hand as they crossed the shallow ford. "It's only water," she said softly, "nothing more." He looked at her, a faint, sad smile on his lips. She did not know the weight of his half-remembered dreams. "Yes, only water," he murmured, urging his horse forward. They visited the Eyrie next, perched high among the peaks of the Vale. Jon Arryn, older and grayer, welcomed them warmly. He introduced them to his young wards, the children of small lords who had come to learn the ways of knighthood. Rhaegar thought of how Jon Arryn had once fostered both Robert and Ned. Though that bond had led to a near rebellion, it had also provided a sense of honorable unity that Rhaegar still relied upon. Jon Arryn seemed content with the realm's stability, praising Rhaegar for his wisdom in building alliances. He spoke of the Vale's prosperity, the harvests unspoiled by war. Thus, the royal progress ended with the monarchy's reputation burnished. House Targaryen had reached out to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms, forging personal ties. When Rhaegar and Elia returned to King's Landing, winter's chill had begun to bite the wind, but the city was calmer, wealthier, safer. Tywin's administration had overseen a year of balanced finances, with gold in the treasury rather than debt. Barristan and Arthur had spent that time honing the King's Guard, weeding out the last of the corrupt or disloyal men. Varys remained ever-present in the corridors, offering quiet intelligence on potential threats. Even the ghosts of Aerys seemed to have faded, replaced by the lively hum of a capital that thrived under more merciful rule. Late one night, Rhaegar found himself in the Red Keep's library, surrounded by ancient tomes. Candlelight flickered, illuminating the dust motes that danced across shelves. He pored over a volume on the early Targaryen kings, reading accounts of how they consolidated power after the conquest, how they dealt with rebellious lords, how they navigated the complexities of dynastic marriages. He sighed, shutting the book gently. House Targaryen had once been so mighty, unopposed, their dragons an omnipresent threat. Now that power was gone. Yet Rhaegar had begun to see that perhaps the old ways of fear and fire were not the only path. Perhaps a Targaryen king could rule through respect, through reason, and that approach might create a more enduring foundation than conquest alone. He rose and walked to a narrow window. Outside, the moonlit city stretched into darkness, pinpricks of light marking taverns still open, the glow of lanterns on merchant ships in the bay. He thought of the future. His children would grow in a kingdom that had avoided Robert's rebellion's devastation. The north had not been burned. The Stormlands had not been ravaged. King's Landing had not been sacked. The Iron Throne, so often a seat of blood and betrayal, might stand as a beacon of hope if the realm remained vigilant. Still, ominous questions nagged at his mind. He had read of the long night, of the legends that said darkness would come again. Without dragons, how would Westeros defend itself? Perhaps the realm's unity under a fair king would do more good than any single beast of fire. Prophecy said a prince with a song of ice and fire might arise to lead them. Rhaegar thought of his line, his children with Elia and the child with Lyanna. Could it be one of them? Or maybe a future generation? Time would tell. In the months that followed, Rhaegar convened a grand council to further codify the laws that would prevent another king from slipping into tyranny. Lords from across Westeros sent representatives or came in person. At Tywin's urging, they drafted new guidelines about how a king's powers could be checked by a council of regents if he displayed madness or criminal acts. They created clearer rules for succession to avoid confusion about bastards or half-siblings. Rhaegar himself was the first to sign these reforms, symbolically curbing his own absolute authority, an act that stunned many who remembered the cruelty of Aerys. Some conservative lords protested, claiming that it undermined the monarchy's divine right. But the majority saw it as a wise safeguard against future madness. After days of debate, the council approved the measures. In an impressive display of cooperation, the lords applauded the new laws and a sense of cautious optimism spread. Peace was not perfect. The Ironborn tested the waters by raiding a few villages on the southwestern coast, but Tywin swiftly dispatched ships from Lannisport and the royal fleet, driving them off before it escalated. Bandits rose in the Riverlands only to be crushed by the Tullus with discreet assistance from Rhaegar's men. In all these conflicts, Rhaegar offered measured support, ensuring that no region felt neglected but also avoiding the impression of an overbearing monarchy. It was delicate, but it worked. Over time, Robert Baratheon's hostility receded into a simmer of distant resentment. He remained aloof at Storm's End, content with hunts and feasts, fathering bastards and forging local alliances as it pleased him. He wrote occasionally to Ned Stark in the north, complaining about Targaryens. But no new rebellion formed around him. Meanwhile, Ned Stark's letters to the king were cordial if not warm. He provided updates on the wildlings near the wall, some of whom trickled south to escape rumored terrors in the far north. That was the first sign of the darkness that might one day loom again. But for now, few took the wildlings' tales seriously. In King's Landing, the years began to pass more swiftly. Aegon learned to walk, then to speak. Rhaenys learned to ride a pony in the courtyard. Elia guided them lovingly, ensuring they understood Dornish culture and King's Landing customs alike. Arthur Dayne remained a loyal friend, training the children in the basics of swordplay when they were old enough. Barristan watched over them like a kindly uncle, telling stories of chivalry. Tywin maintained the realm's finances with an iron grip, ensuring that roads were built, ports were improved, and the crown's gold reserves grew. Each year, the realm grew more prosperous and the scars of Aerys' tyranny faded. Still, Rhaegar never forgot that everything hinged on the realm's unity. He continued to hold councils, to settle disputes among the great houses, to invite input from smaller lords who felt overlooked. He sponsored tourneys from time to time, not lavish spectacles meant only to show Targaryen splendor, but carefully organized competitions that drew knights from every region, fostering camaraderie. During these tourneys, Rhaegar often performed on his harp in the evenings, winning admiration for his gentle songs about knights and their loves, about the travails of kings who yearned for peace. Minstrels carried those songs throughout Westeros, shaping the image of Rhaegar as the bard king who had ended a war before it truly began. Eventually, talk arose about Rhaenys' betrothal. Tywin, ever watchful, suggested his grandson by Cersei if a suitable match could be arranged. Others whispered that a northern match might seal closer ties with House Stark. Dorne, of course, favored a union with House Martell. Rhaegar, wanting to avoid a hasty choice, delayed the betrothal. Rhaenys was still young, and he preferred to let her childhood remain free of such burdens at least for a few more years. As for Aegon, some spoke of a union with the Tyrells, uniting the crown and the Reach more tightly. Others suggested an alliance across the narrow sea to foster trade. Rhaegar listened to the council, but again he hesitated, wanting to see how his children's personalities developed before binding them in marriage for political convenience. Tywin believed that a king must be decisive, but Rhaegar argued that a father must also be careful with the futures of his children. Elia often reminded Rhaegar that these alliances might one day spare the realm another conflict. He acknowledged her logic, though a pang always stabbed his heart when he thought of betrothing Aegon or Rhaenys for purely dynastic gain. He wanted them to have a life that was not overshadowed by the ghosts of war and prophecy. For better or worse, though, this was the burden of a royal family. As the children grew, so too did Jon Stark in the north. Ned's letter spoke of a bright, inquisitive boy who excelled at sword training, with a quiet but determined nature. Rhaegar's eyes lingered on each mention of Jon's achievements. He felt a swirl of pride and sorrow that he could not publicly acknowledge the boy as his son. Lyanna remained distant, never writing to Rhaegar directly, though Ned conveyed that she was content in her own way, raising Jon at Winterfell and occasionally visiting her father's tombs. Robert asked about her rarely, but when he did, it was with bitterness. The tension there remained a tinderbox best left unlit. So the realm persisted for nearly a decade in relative calm. A generation began to rise that had no memory of King Aerys' cruelty, that saw King Rhaegar as the rightful occupant of the Iron Throne. Even stories of how Robert Baratheon had once threatened a rebellion faded into the realm of rumor, overshadowed by the stable years since. Knights praised the king's fairness, merchants prospered from the renewed roads, farmers reaped bountiful harvests. In Dorne, Rhaegar remained beloved, the Martells proud that their Elia was queen. In the Westerlands, Tywin's stewardship made House Lannister wealthier than ever, though some whispered that if Rhaegar ever faltered, Tywin might claim the throne. Yet Tywin did not make a move. A realm at peace was good for gold. Rhaegar never forgot that winter would come. Each year, he ordered the realm to stockpile food and supplies, ensuring that no region faced a shortage if the cold proved harsh. The Citadel sent white ravens from time to time, indicating the changing seasons, but no disastrous winter befell them yet. Rhaegar could only pray that when it came, Westeros would be ready. In the quiet hours, he sometimes felt that presence again, the old gods swirling through the weirwood he had planted in the garden. He would pause, close his eyes, and whisper a thank you. For the moment, the realm was united under a king who sought peace, not subjugation. Fire and blood had given way to reason and hope. Those who had known the darkest days of Aerys' madness occasionally reflected that this was not how history was meant to unfold. Some, like Barristan Selmy, remembered standing at the side of King Aerys when the realm teetered on the brink of destruction. Barristan had braced himself for a war that might claim tens of thousands of lives, that might leave King's Landing in flames. Yet the war never came, thanks to Rhaegar's willingness to parley and perhaps some unseen hand that whispered warnings to the silver-haired prince. Barristan felt gratitude each day he served under a king who listened to counsel instead of screaming for heads to roll. Arthur Dayne carried his own sense of quiet pride. He had stood with Rhaegar, believed in him when no one else was certain, and watched the Seven Kingdoms step back from the precipice. He trained the king's children, saw them laugh and spar, and felt a sense of peace rarely afforded a Kingsguard knight. His sword, Dawn, had not taken many lives in these years, and for that he was profoundly grateful. Even Jaime Lannister, who had once been forced to kill King Aerys to prevent the city's destruction, found a strange kind of redemption serving under Rhaegar. Though the stigma of Kingslayer still clung to him in some corners, Rhaegar treated him with guarded respect, understanding that Jaime had averted catastrophe when Aerys tried to unleash wildfire. Tywin's presence shielded Jaime from the worst condemnation. Over time, Jaime matured into a reliable member of the King's Guard, though a certain sardonic edge never left him. Far to the north, Eddard Stark kept a silent watch, mindful that only a handful of men knew the truth about Jon's parentage. He believed that truth might one day matter a great deal. For now, though, the boy was content to be raised among the wolves of Winterfell, calling Ned his father in all but blood. As for Lyanna, her youthful restlessness had quieted, replaced by a fierce love for the son she had borne. She rode the winter snows with Jon, teaching him what it meant to be a Stark, singing him old songs of heroes who fought for the living. On the coldest nights, she sometimes dreamed of a silver-haired prince with a harp standing in a garden and woke with tears drying on her cheeks. In the Stormlands, Robert Baratheon remained an uneasy figure, still capable of raising armies if provoked. Yet ironically, the realm's long peace seemed to sap his thirst for war. He once excelled at the battlefield at the raw excitement of conflict. With that possibility all but gone, he drifted from one indulgence to the next, half content, half resentful that he had not been the one to shape the realm's destiny. Some days he would bellow that all Targaryens were serpents, other days he would grunt that at least this Targaryen's not so bad. The smallfolk around Storm's End often found him rowdy but not cruel. Robert commanded enough loyalty that if push came to shove, thousands would still rise for him. But push never came. And so it was that the Seven Kingdoms, so often torn by strife, enjoyed a precious respite under King Rhaegar. The legacy of fire and blood softened to a gentler tune, one that drifted through the countryside in the form of minstrel songs about the king who sang with his harp and brought peace where war once loomed. Quietly, the realm rebuilt, forging roads, alliances, and a generation that might face the next threat, whatever form it took, united rather than divided. Though none could see the distant future, none could know with certainty when the cold winds of the north or the scalding intrigues of Essos might intrude. They at least had hope. In the nighttime hush, Rhaegar would sometimes walk alone along the battlements of the Red Keep, gazing at the glittering stars. He would recall that the realm might have known a different fate. Rivers running red with blood, kings landing in flames, families shattered by vengeance. Yet here they stood, spared that ruin. Perhaps it was a subtle shift in destiny, triggered by a whisper from old gods or a chance moment of insight. Rhaegar quietly gave thanks for that mercy. He vowed never to squander it. The only war he would wage was against injustice and suffering, hoping that unity, rather than terror, would sustain House Targaryen. Sometimes, he wondered whether in some other strand of time, he had fallen to Robert on the Trident, rubies scattering in the river's flow, the Targaryen dynasty undone. The echo of that nightmare haunted him. But then he remembered Elaya's hand in his, the laughter of Rhaenys, the wide-eyed innocence of Aegon, and the realm's relief from endless war. Destiny had been reshaped, or perhaps it was always meant to be so. With each step forward, Rhaegar sought to honor that reprieve from violence. So nights and days flowed onward in a kingdom no longer racked by rebellion. Certain lords who had once favored chaos learned to bide their time or found new roads to influence. Others discovered prosperity they'd never known, trading grain and ores across roads once shattered by conflict. The small folk toiled, but with fewer fears of armies trampling their fields. In corners of the land, old hatred still festered. No realm is free of grudges, but they lacked the fueling fire of the monarchy's oppression. Even the faith was calmer, with a high septon who prayed that the new king would shepherd the people instead of devouring them. Far beyond the wall, the great enemy slept in ice and secrecy, unaware or unbothered by who wore the crown. But the day might come when the living needed every ounce of unity. Perhaps then, Rhaegar's painstaking efforts, the alliances he nurtured, and the children he raised would prove the difference between survival and annihilation. The prince, once haunted by prophecy, now stood as a king determined to guard the realm he loved. And if the old gods that whispered through the weirwoods had any further words of warning, they would find him ready to listen, harp in hand, heart open, ruling not by fear, but by the gentle flame of hope that lingered in every corner of the Seven Kingdoms.